Thank you very much. Can I welcome everyone to the Justice Subcommittee meeting on policing. It's our 6th meeting in 2013. Can I apologise for the delay? Two of myself and Alison McInnes were in the members' debate, which just finished at 1:15. This is one of the problems we're facing, but we may resolve this in due course. Can I ask everyone to switch off mobile phones and other electronic devices completely, as they interfere with the broadcasting system even when switched to silent, and no apologies have been received. I move straight on to item 1. ICT provision. Can I welcome back Martin Leven, Chief Information Officer for the Scottish Police Authority, who gave evidence on this issue earlier this month. Mr Leven is joined at the table by Deputy Chief Constable Neil Richardson, designated Deputy for Chief Constable Police Scotland. That's a mouthful. Now, straight to questions because time is always tight. Questions? I've got Kevin Stewart, followed by John Finney, and then followed by Graham Pearson. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I think we should maybe just cut to the chase here. Could you tell us where you are with the ICT blueprint, please?
Following the evidence I gave here a few weeks ago, there was an immediate meeting thereafter where myself and Neil jointly presented to the members of the authority our plans for the blueprint and application level technology as well. We were given guidance by the members. We represented again earlier this week, and I think it's fair to say that there is support from the members for both the blueprint and the I6 application stream. We will be presenting formally to the SPA board in the June board meeting, which is the public board meeting in June. There's a little bit of work to do in the paperwork and how it's actually presented, but we have made good progress in the delivery of the blueprint.
Thank you. You mentioned I6, Mr Richardson. Obviously, some of us around the table are more aware than others of that. Could you maybe expand on I6, please, and where that fits into the blueprint?
By all means, happy to do that. My, I guess, input to the ICT blueprint, as Martin has described, was effectively to identify what the business requirement is now and moving forward. And a central strand to that contains a number of what I would describe as mission-critical supporting elements that are contained within the I6 proposal. Such things as crime and the management of crime through the criminal justice process. It's almost an end-to-end process that has interconnections and dependencies that enable a maximum kind of end-to-end process to be slickly managed with the use of IT. So I6 is a proposal that's many years in the making. It has an application that's gone through a competitive dialogue process that was started long before the changes were initiated for Police Scotland, but have reached a decision point, and that is a decision that is currently sitting with the SPA.
Before we move further, it's very entertaining to see the Deputy Chief Constable sitting in his suit, because I realise you've got the wrong nameplates in front of you. So if you could just swap them. I was getting a bit confused there. I thought, is this part of the new strategy? To confuse us. You didn't know that, but I can't quite follow this, I thought. Right, sorry, Kevin.
That's okay. I have to say that I wasn't really paying attention to the nameplates, but there we go. Gentlemen, in the past, ACPOS have had some difficulties in terms of managing major ICT projects. Obviously, the one that springs to mind is the Common Performance Management Platform, £7.7 million, and then a project abandoned. Was that also known as Platform? Is that right?
It was, yes.
Yes. What confidence can you give to us that what you're doing at this moment in time won't end up in another platform-type fiasco?
It's a really valid question, and I would suggest that there is a world of difference between the I6 programme and business proposal and what happened in the platform process. A number of things make it different, and again, I probably just point to bearing in mind, of course, that there is an analysis of that particular journey, which I understand is imminent but not yet in the public domain. But having been a chief officer, living through the experience that you described around trying to deliver ICT projects within 8 forces and a central kind of agency, the circumstances that led to the failure in platform have been addressed by the way in which the business was taken forward in I6. So in other words, there was a very ill-defined kind of understanding about what was required at the start of the platform process, and that learning led to an absolute lockdown appreciation of what our business requirement was moving forward into I6. And the journey, which has been externally evaluated and assured on a number of different occasions, including 3 gateway reviews for I6, effectively it follows a pretty clear path that involves about 6 months of detailed work to lock down the business requirements so that we know absolutely what we need moving forward, and then a period of competitive dialogue. It's the first time we've engaged with such a process in Scottish policing terms, but it has proved extremely valuable, and the learning that we have derived from that is quite outstanding. So in other words, once you know exactly what you require and you expose that to the market to enable the market to provide potential solutions to that, and then work through a series of meetings to challenge and to test that, and again you go through that over an iterative process until you reach an absolutely clear definition about what you require, how it's going to be delivered and what it's going to look like.
One final question, Convener, if I may, and that's round about the processes themselves. Having been involved in some ICT projects in the past at local government level, but also having seen some of the policing stuff before, one of the difficulties that often arises is when in the middle or at the end of the process, the users say to the vendors that they want something a little bit different. They suddenly decide that they want all of the bells and whistles and they want add-ons. I take it that we are not in this situation going along those lines, and that the gateway processes that you have described have ironed out all of that kind of nonsenses?
Absolutely, another extremely valid question. The simple answer is yes. What we have done is been very, very keen to stick to the initial requirements. We have not allowed mission creep to enter into that at all. And I, as the SRO, have guarded against that at every single stage. The scope has changed on 2 occasions, but that change has been in our mutual benefit, and it's been a change that was easily embraceable as part of the journey, so it didn't distract what we were originally intended to do. It just added more benefit. And so, again, mindful of the fact that that is a common reason for failure, we've been very keen to make sure that we didn't allow that to creep in with I6.
Thank you, Convener.
Mr. Leaven, you don't wish to comment? Just let me know.
I would certainly add, I agree completely with Neil in that aspect. There has been remarkable diligence put into the project and the scoping to date, and the gateway reviews have been pretty thorough that have reached us to this decision point.
Thank you. I've got John, Margaret.
Thank you, Convener. As for either of the gentlemen, and good afternoon. Mr. Richards, when you use a term like mission critical, I'm sure you don't use it casually, and that is the significance it is placed to these projects. You'll probably both be familiar, and I make no apologies for revisiting the issues touched on by my colleague there. There was a report in August of last year by Audit Scotland which covered the management of ICT contracts, and although the police weren't involved, there were people in the justice sector such as Disclosure Scotland, Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Service, and if I may refer to the report found significant weakness with the programmes around business case quality, governance and control, and it also comments about the lack of in-house specialist knowledge. Can you comment on these specific aspects in relation to this? I think it's important that we learn from the past, but more important that we have a positive view of how the future is going to go.
I'm happy to do that. I'm also aware of that report, and I anticipated that members of the Police Authority may well ask similar questions, so as a consequence I've prepared answers in that domain. The business case in its own right has gone through a very long and very detailed journey. It has had to secure the buy-in and support of a number of different stakeholders, which again has changed because the landscape has changed. So initially 8 chief constables, the government and indeed the SPSA all needed to be convinced that this this journey towards what was IM at the time, Information Management, into I6 more latterly. It was a worthwhile journey, and we have been successful in doing that. So when we embarked on the outline stages following a strategic plan being presented, all of the people I've just mentioned were signatories to this journey and contributed assets and finance effectively to turn it into a reality. Latterly, again, through a slavage adherence effectively to Treasury guidelines around business case protocols, making sure that there was strict governance in place, etc., and not allowing any diversion to that, mindful of the fact that we have, and I personally have some battle scars from having tried to go through processes previously and been a victim for the slippage and the mission creep that we've already discussed. This one was undoubtedly different, and the business case has been subjected to external assurance, not just through Gateway, but from a learning environment that was created so that colleagues that have gone through similar processes were brought in to share their learning with us, and vice versa. And again, because of that, the business case was as robust as I've ever seen, not just in ICT terms, but in policing terms. In terms of the skills base, that is a critical component in my view, and the lessons that we have learned through the progression of I6 will undoubtedly stand as the benchmark moving forward from here. And so we deliberately brought in the appropriate skills. Where there was a need for independence, we brought in independent specialists, and there's one such individual on the team who provides a technical input and works as a bridge, if you like, between the preferred bidder and the bidders moving through the process, SPSA, and the business. And again, what we have had is a consistency in these individuals, so they haven't moved in and out of the programme, they've been there for the duration. And I think that that's a significant component in the success that we've enjoyed up to date.
If I may continue, yes. We, as the Justice Committee previously and as the Police Subcommittee, have been interested in the relationships. When you talk about an independent element in this, that's another relationship into the equation. Are you able to comment on how, given the systematic way you've gone about things, are things working cohesively as you move forward?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of the I6 case, Martin, as the CIO, sits on the board that I chair that has kind of progressed I6 all the way through. In the duration, we've had 25 SPSA technical members of staff that have contributed to various elements of the business case and the proposition as it's moved forward. And I would suggest that that has worked well in terms of taking the business case through a fairly detailed and rigorous process.
And is that your position as well, Mr?
I would absolutely agree, and I would guarantee the committee that I've been sitting in the programme board. Senior members of my team have been involved in technical evaluation of the product. We have robustly challenged all the technical assumptions in the project, and myself and the full technical team fully support the project. We think it's an exceptional piece of work to this date.
Okay, but that's all very positive, and we often learn from mistakes, and this isn't about the historic matters that have been commented. I wonder, Mr. Richardson, if you were able to see whether there's been any operational difficulties arising out of the assortment of IT that from an operational side of us had to be dealt with.
So could you clarify what you mean by operational?
Well, frontline police operations, have they been affected by the fact that there's a myriad of systems that had to come together on the 1st of April this year?
I think frontline policing operations operate in a very similar way to they operated prior to the 1st of April, and there were a set of priorities delivered to SPSA ICT at that time that were called the Day 1 deliverable projects, and there was a significant range of projects that were delivered as a result of that. I can touch on these later. However, frontline policing operation continues as is. People are still in the street, they're still operating. Certain aspects of policing require some manual intervention in order to share information between the previous legacy force boundaries. So if you imagine, we have got some systems that were previous national and they continue to operate in a national manner. But one of the purposes of I6 was to collaboratively join up. I think it's over 100 different systems that were completely separate in all the force areas to give one suite of systems that would enable more efficient use of frontline officers.
I wonder, Mr. Richardson, can you comment, for instance, on criminal intelligence? Is that something that doesn't recognise the historic boundaries and is shared across the country?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think the reality of the position is that a move to Day 1 it didn't expose frontline policing to any heightened risk. The reality is we were already carrying a fairly significant risk in a number of different domains, and that's just a reality of life. The ICT landscape across Scotland is in an extremely challenging position. We have some extremely ageing, dated systems. There are a number of core processes, which again I would describe as mission critical, that are still operating on manual basis. So literally books and form filling applies certainly across the board. I think there's only one force that has a technical solution to productions, and we take hundreds of thousands of productions every year, and they are instrumental and significant in the process of the criminal justice kind of stream. So there are some extremely important bits of business that are we rely on, either dated ICT or no ICT, and there's a pressing need, and there has been for some considerable time, to try and bring that together, converge it, and modernise it. And so the move to a single police service provided a fantastic opportunity to do that. And I6, I think, is a standout opportunity at this very early stage to make a very significant step in that right direction.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll take others forward, and I'll look for supplementary, so somebody wants to come in on some of the issues.
I've got one supplementary there, because Mr Richardson there talked about some of the processes still being done manually. Yeah. Personally, I don't think that that's a bad thing, because I've seen in other spheres a move from manual collation of data for whatever reason to an ICT system, where it has actually taken much, much longer to deal with that process, and beyond that has even further restricted access to information. Can I ask, is there the attitude that ICT is the answer to everything here? Because in real life, Convener, I don't think that's always the case.
No, there's absolutely no question that ICT is going to be the silver bullet, but there's also absolutely no doubt that there is a need to modernise the core systems that police officers on the front line require to do their job. So on a practical basis, what happens at the moment when a police officer starts their duty and hits the street, if they go to an initial call, and this is bread and butter, it happens every day, of the year, officers will become involved in some kind of incident and potentially required to arrest somebody. In processing that individual, they are required to support a number of different disparate processes and systems. They need to record it on the criminal system, they need to lodge intelligence, they need to perhaps lodge productions. They need to make sure that there's a custody record completed. If there's a vulnerable person element to this, that has to be completed. And what we have, in effect, because we've done detailed analysis around this, is that to support some basic routine activities from police officers, they are spending an unreasonable amount of time in the office, out of the public eye, simply feeding bureaucratic processes, and we need to, I think we're duty bound to do everything we possibly can to streamline that.
Can I ask, Convener, bureaucratic processes have been said there.
If you could bear with me just a wee minute. I do want to let other members in. Sure. Bear with me. I know he's a convener in another world, you see, so I have to contain him a moment. Please, Kevin, I'll just because I've got a wee list and may very well want to ask the same things. I'll take Graham, then Margaret, then Alison, and then you can come back in again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. And I'm conscious of the limited time we have, and that's a pity. First thing I would say is I welcome the move that would appear to have occurred over the last 4 or 5 weeks and the degree of urgency that seems to be reflected there. A couple of questions, and hopefully not to spoil the way forward. Can we be very clear, we kind of plunged into the I6 right from the outset, from the intelligent customer's viewpoint, as was alluded to at our last meeting, the need for an intelligent customer. Is this the priority for Police Scotland, I6?
At the moment, there's no doubt that this is the standout priority for Police Scotland, but it's not the only priority.
No, but is that, if you were pinned against the wall and said, if there's one thing we could deliver that's important to the efficiency and effectiveness of the service, I6 is where you put your heart?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, there was some discussion at our last meeting that there was a need to wait for the current executive to get in post and settle down and give the tick in the box for the way forward. can we have an assurance that if any of the current executive leave, we don't go back to intelligence status again and try and reassess what I6 is about? Is it a generic need that no matter who sits in the executive, this is what's needed in Scotland?
I think it's fair to say I don't actually recognise that comment, and I certainly don't support it. I don't think that there is anything that's changed significantly in terms of the ICT landscape and indeed the strategic requirements of policing. I think are pretty consistent. There is nothing really that has changed significantly in either the picture that I've just painted, which is not a rosy one, around ICT support. And in fact, I think, Graham, if you walked into a police station, you would be very familiar with what you saw there, because there's been little change since you left. And so in terms of the delivery of policing, there are some things that are more sharpened, I suppose, now that we've moved into a single service, but the requirement stands the same today.
It's business-led, not personality-led.
Yes.
Yeah. And in that regard, I know that between the SPSA, and I know Martin was part of the project team last year at SPA, along with yourself, in developing the needs arrangements for I6, and an agreement back in October to go forward with this development. Are there any other pressures in terms of arriving at a decision in June that we should bear in mind? Are we getting to a stage where we either need to go with I6 or decide that some other alternative needs to be found?
I6 is undoubtedly reaching a pressure point for decision, and the authority are currently actively engaged in that. There is no doubt. This is again something that is perhaps an unfortunate element of timing. The procurement journey was started for I6 some 2 years ago, and so it's reached a conclusion at a point which, you know, is just, I guess, unfortunate, given that it's a major financial investment decision that a brand new authority are faced with. But nonetheless, because of the criticality and importance of it, it is there nonetheless.
But presumably, without going into the detail of the private sector involvement, there will be people in the private sector who are quite tense about the current timings and decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now for yourself, Mr. Leven, you talked about the blueprint and the discussions about blueprint, and I note the language. Do we have an ICT strategy as yet?
This is a blueprint and an investment blueprint which delivers the enabling ICT that will enable us to deliver the police priorities. So from the priorities that Police Scotland have passed across to SPA to deliver this year, or as soon as possible, is I6 as a #1 priority. There's centralised command and control. There's HR, finance and payroll back office systems. And
but do you have a strategy as yet? You know, part of your function, I think, when you took office, was that you would deliver an ICT strategy for policing in Scotland. Do you feel that you've now got that, or do you still have a way to go before you deliver a strategy? The
blueprint provides the strategic direction at the moment. I'm not trying to avoid the question, I'm trying to explain where we're going. The blueprint provides the strategic direction at the moment with the information we have at the present moment in time. So if I can put it to you, a couple of things that are dependent upon setting an ICT strategy is the full business strategy. This case within SPA, we don't have any state strategy, we don't have a fleet strategy, and these are being worked on and ready for submission. Again, there's other areas that we have to bear in mind and put in place. If SPSA, and it wasn't under the remit of SPSA, we have to have delivered a strategy in October last year or November last year, almost certainly it would have been completely changed and rewritten by now, because the environment that we're operating in have been completely changed. We're still to get full clarification of the funding streams available to us and the amount of money that is available to us to invest in technology. And whatever strategy I put in place has to tie in to Scotland's Digital Future strategy. It has to be compatible with criminal justice ICT strategies, and it has to be compatible with the wider UK policing ICT strategies. So unfortunately, it's not something that we can realistically deliver a strategy fit for purpose that will please everybody within 60 days of us launching the police service. But this blueprint that we put in place will deliver the absolute investment required to enable the priorities that Neil and his team have submitted.
And when you look at your own calendar and you look to the future, when do you hope within your calendar that you would be in a position to say, I now have a strategy?
Again, it's difficult to say, and I'm not avoiding the question, but it's an evolving situation, and the route changes, and the requirements of policing will change, and the requirements of the authority change at the present moment in time. I would certainly anticipate 6 months I should be delivering a strategy forward.
In that context, given that your current budget is less than 1%, I think it's less than 0.5% of the current budget, is it realistic to imagine that one could deliver on I6 as a blueprint, and thereafter your strategy with such a, seems a paltry amount of money?
Well, the police priorities are absolutely dependent on the blueprint investment requirements going forward. It's a case of we need that investment put in place or we will not be able to deliver the police priorities. I6 has been designed on the lowest common denominator, i.e. the IT we have in place at the present moment in time, but that with it will carry some risk from single points of failure that exist at the moment and some very aged equipment across the estate. However, command and control, centralised finance, payroll, HR, forward intelligence systems would not be able to operate on our existing infrastructure as far as a centralised manner, so we do need to make that investment. Whether or not we have the money to make that investment, I'm afraid, is above my pay grade, and I can't comment on that. So the authority, I believe, are still pulling the figures together that it takes to run operational policing. And there's a capital pot that is not dedicated to ICT. There's a capital pot that is split amongst all policing priorities, whether it is estates, whether it is fleet, whether it is the crime campus, whether it's I6, whether it's the blueprint. And I believe the authority have got some decisions to make with regard to that.
So in terms of the allocated sum of money, I think the answer would be no, but there's a possibility that there might be monies elsewhere within the budget that could be relocated.
Again, we don't have any allocated money pointing at ICT. In terms of capital investment, we have got a capital pot that IT can bid for, and the authority will make the decision what happens. There has been no specific money other than the operational budgets, the revenue budgets that
Is that the 12 million that we were told about previously?
Yeah, the 12 million was the money that I believe government predicted would be required for the first 3 years of enabling ICT to do the merger. The figures that I'm submitting as part of the blueprint are in excess of £12 million.
I think the final point to make, and allow others then to come in, you mentioned about system change on 1st of April and the various historical systems that lie in place. I think for clarity, if I understand things, the systems that you alluded to the last time, like of HR and so forth, essentially they're still the old systems that were in place previously, and they don't actually function as one single system across the whole network. What you've managed to do is arrange for a kind of location of various systems, and human beings make the gap difference. Would that be a more accurate description rather than one national system?
Yeah, in terms of HR, we have 8 different HR systems, or 9 different HR systems if you bring SPSA into the equation, around the country. We decided with police in early last year or summer last year that it was not achievable for us to merge one single system across. Now, that's not just technical restraints. It would have been a very challenging technical project.
Understand.
And as Mr Stewart has already alluded to, technical projects are very, very difficult to achieve in a very short period of time. That would have been a challenge, but we were also dealing with 8 police forces that had 8 different sets of terms and conditions. And when you've got one system, that has to be all merged up. We were also dealing with 8 different command and control systems that have automatic links into these systems for duty management and for resource allocation, which would have been a whole variety of interfaces. It was not going to be achievable before day one. So the instruction we got from the police reform team at the time was, give us a system that can tell us where everyone is going to be, okay, how we contact them, who they are. Give us a system that's compatible with the new badging number scheme, so a new unique identifier. So, for example, if Central Constabulary had the same badging numbers as Lothian and Border, so we could separate out the officers across the board. And then we'll look at a national solution thereafter.
No, I agree, and I understood that from the first presentation, but I think some members understood that there was now a national system which was electronic and ICT driven. But what you've done is created a number of conventions where human beings make up the difference between the various systems. They're not all linked together. I'm happy.
Thank you. I have Margaret, then Alison.
Good afternoon. My colleagues have been fairly thorough, but if I could just tease away another couple of points that they've raised. You've indicated it could be challenging to deliver the ICT strategy for consideration of the board at its June meeting, the SPA board at its June meeting. But could you perhaps tell me the timescale and process for individual business cases to be submitted to the SPA board? Now, I know you've said there's a central budget, but presumably there's still work going on that aspect.
The purpose of the blueprint we are delivering to the SPA board is to let them know an indication of the cost of investment and enabling ICT that's required to deliver the police priorities and nationalise the ICT setup going forward. Further to that, that will allow the board an idea of the money that should be kept aside this year from their budget capital allocation that they give out to there. Thereafter, I certainly anticipate and I welcome individual business cases for every ICT investment that we do. I think we should be cross-examining everything that comes thereafter. Some of the ICT investment I want to make this year is in the millions of pounds for particular items and particular types of technology to enable the delivery of the police priorities. And my understanding, and again something I fully support in an environment I'm very used to working in, is we will have a business case for every bit of technology that will be based on return on investment, whether that's risk reduction, whether it's efficiency gaining, for every single piece that we put in.
I suppose my question really is, can that work be ongoing now? It doesn't have to wait till the board meets and you know how much money you're going to get. You can have a kind of wish list. Once you know how much you've got, then you can tailor that. But at least the groundwork is being done now, which would seem a sensible way forward.
The groundwork is heavily being done at the present moment in time, and as soon as we get the go-ahead that this is something that the board are willing to support, then we will be submitting business cases very fast to start getting the technology in.
So the individual work just now, the business case work is being done.
Very much so.
Can I ask you if ICT features in local plans as part of local plans at all?
Not from a funding perspective, but yes, it does. I'll give you an example of the website that we launched on the 1st of April, and the website has got very in-depth details that the public have never had before, when they can go in and find out who their local community officer is. They can have full details of the local policing plan, contact details nationally across the country with a postcode lookup. People can find information. From that aspect, ICT has been very heavily involved.
Mm-hmm. If there was any disagreement about IC, just for example, and what was contained in the local plan, what would happen? What would be the mechanism for resolving that?
Well, this is part of governance set up that we're working very closely with Neil's team to get there. If I could take in a little historic journey, just to let you know how it worked beforehand and how we would deal with it now in comparison. And prior to the 1st of April with the legacy forces, you had 8 different constabularies with 8 different ICT strategies and a national ICT system strategy that was controlled by ACPOS. And that resulted in an ICT department that was diverse around the country, reacting and being instructed to put in a completely different set of technologies in different environment. What we now have the opportunity to do is make sure that all technology that is approved, so if a divisional commander would like a little bit of technology into their division that is not available in any other division, we recommend against that. And we think that all investment should be in national solutions, so we have the same experience for members of the public right across the country. And working with Neil's team to build together a governance function that allows the police to prioritise how we put individual pieces of work in, not the ICT team, the police, based on the ICT availability and technical advice.
And just returning very briefly, I too had looked at this paper-based and some manual system. Could you go into a little bit more detail of exactly what that would involve? I know you said some exhibits or productions maybe, but and what priority? You've talked about priority in some cases, and then in this paper that we have as the briefing, it suggested that converting some of these manual systems to computer is a priority. Could you tease that out a little bit?
Sure. Well, within the I6 project, I think the vast majority, if not all, and I'll kind of look to Neil for confirmation of that, of paper-based processes are removed and are turned electronic in combination with the other business areas that come in. So it's a single source of truth for information that we've got in one data set. Going forward, I think Neil's far more qualified to tease out exactly the paper-based systems and how they impact operational policing at the moment.
The best example as a standout is the production register. And so whilst I do take the point that moving away into technology isn't always the solution, the reality with it, because it's a core process that is critical for the progress of criminal justice, is that officers come in and effectively, certainly within the west of the country, stand in a queue to fill in the single register. We can't have multiple registers because, of course, that increases risk. So often you will find, particularly in the busier stations, officers standing around waiting for an opportunity to put vital information in a book. Again, the inefficiencies that are there now, day and daily, with a number of systems, because of legacy arrangements, are really at the heart of the business case for I6, and one of the reasons it is such a compelling case and opportunity to bring about change that will deliver strategic value, operational value and financial value. If I can just develop, I suppose where Martin and I are perhaps I am not quite as optimistic in terms of Martin's description about potential conflict and how we might resolve that conflict moving forward. And I say that primarily because within the service we have, over a number of years, been trying to do business in that way with the SPSA arrangements that were in place, and that has been really extremely difficult. And a lot of people have put a lot of effort in to try and make progress, and yet it's a matter of public record that progress was not great. And in fact, there's two public documents that summarise that quite effectively in an Audit Scotland report and an independent review completed by Mott MacDonald. Both of these reports contained a pretty reasonable description of some of the barriers, and these relate to engaging governance and problem resolution kind of activities that you've asked about and Martin's answered. And whilst some of that may be easier with a single service, they won't be as easy as they should be if ICT was part of that single service. And it does strike me as still anomalous that whilst recommendations remain outstanding from these bits of work that were done in order to try and find a route to improvement, that the opportunity we had to embrace ICT back within the service and streamline some of the activities so that with one single decision maker and person in the chair, namely the Chief Constable, to direct HR or finance or ICT as a critical component of any business, has been removed. And therefore, I think that there remains a concern moving forward in terms of our ability to bring in line ICT strategic requirements and business requirements and make that business work. And so, my position has been pretty consistent on that, but I'm of the view that that is something that should be urgently looked at and reconsidered in terms of embracing ICT back within the service.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Unless you have a very direct and clear line of communication, then you're going to waste a lot of time and potentially money too. Yeah.
I know there's lots of people interested in now that this has opened up a bit, but I'm just going to get Alison in and then I've got Graham, Kevin and then John. So I'm letting you come in as you're all wanting about Alison.
Thank you. Martin Levin spoke about developing a single point of truth. That's an interesting kind of phrase. Can you talk us through what the security safeguards are in a new system, I suppose, to prevent alterations and amendments and things like that as you move from the manual paper-based systems into logging everything in? With public confidence in the system will need to be very, very high. So can you talk us through some of that?
Sure. Whenever you're developing any new system, you have to look at the fundamentals of information security, which is the confidentiality of the information, the integrity of the information and the availability of the information that is stored thereon. Certainly the I6, if you're referring to that business model, is very much built around these three fundamentals of information security. And what we also have to be very careful with the information that we store in these systems is it's not just about does the information leak, it's who's accessing the information and for what reason are they accessing the information. And again, the I6 business model has quite an impressive level of auditability of why people would be getting into certain information and leaving trails of or forensic ICT trails of why people have been into the information. So in terms of that, I'm absolutely confident in the IS that's been built round about it. In terms of the wider blueprint, we have to adhere to strict information security. One of the challenges we've had previously is we're great at the police environment of thinking we're different to everywhere else. In terms of IT, I fundamentally disagree. I think IT is IT across the board, and information security should be the same across the board, whilst appropriate levels of security are put around. And I personally think sometimes we tie ourselves up in too much information security. So we absolutely nail the confidentiality and the integrity bit, but we make the system so complicated and so difficult to get into that the availability of that data can be compromised. Again, with I6, that's taken care of. It's a very clever system. And we are certainly looking with our blueprint to have a far more balanced approach to information security to make sure we're not taking any risk, we're not bringing any risk at all onto the data that's held within Police Scotland, but we are making the information easier for our officers to get to.
Can I just add to that? Just in practical terms, the position that I just outlined where officers having to re-input the same information over and over again, each time they do it, there is an increased risk of them spelling something wrong or getting an inconsistency into the system, which then causes problems for search, etc. The single kind of premise of I6 is the reuse of data. So it doesn't happen in every occasion, but ideally you put it in once and then it self-populates that same information into custody or vulnerable persons or whatever else. Meaning that so long as you get the input right the first time, and the system is very clever in terms of the proposal that's there so that there are as many built-in safeguards to make sure they don't go into the wrong field, or that if something is obviously wrong, it tells them it's obviously wrong. So the chances of making the data quality of a far higher standard is been basically there as part of the construction phase, and I would have a high confidence that it will be significantly better than now.
It would also mean that there would be no second chance to get something into the system if there was a failure to get things in, yeah?
Well, it can be amended or adjusted, absolutely. Albeit, as Martin said, that there is a sort of security trail of all of that, so every adjustment is recorded so that it can be subsequently audited.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Graham, then Kevin, then John.
Thanks, Convener. A couple of things. One, Neil touched on the relationships issues and ownerships of various responsibilities, particularly in connection with ICT. And I think that is one of the very areas that we as a subcommittee will be interested in over the next months to see what works and works well. The point I wanted to come back on was your description, Martin, about the history of governance over this period. And you seem to indicate that we've now entered the halcyon period post-April, where previous to that, ACPOS were in a terrible disarray, decisions were very difficult to take because of 8 people and so forth. But would it not be fair to say that SPSA played a part in overseeing ICT delivery, and that there was a new kid in the block these last 4 or 5 years in the ICT area? And therefore, we still need to pay a great deal of attention to how governance is actually delivered. I'm quite certain if we go back to the day of SPSA, and I think that you joined the service as an SPSA employee, quite certain that you didn't sit in your seat then in charge of information and not feel you had governance round about you that protected the decision making. And as a result, to merely state it's going to be better from here on in isn't going to cut it. Is that a fair sort of look at the history of where we are just now?
I kind of agree with part of what you said, but really disagree with another part of what you said. If we look back at the history, and this touches on what Neil said there, so first I'm genuinely surprised at the issue of where ICT reports into has come out. I actually thought that was the one area of policing and authority that was agreed very quickly between the Chief Constable and the convener, and certainly hasn't been open to public debate. I realise the ASPs put a statement out last week regarding that. I think on that subject it should make absolutely no difference where ICT report, whether it's the authority, whether it's into the Chief Constable. Sure. I currently sit as a guest in the senior management team, where I've got absolutely no doubt at all if people in the Chief Constable senior management team are not happy with the delivery of IT, they will not miss me and hit the wall if I'm at that forum. I also sit in the executive SPA. But moving back to the historic part of it. Just before you go on that
particular point and we go to the history, I think you would agree that no matter whether or not they vent anger at you, they have no power to instruct.
However, you could turn that on its head, because in a command and control environment, so previously, SPSA were the ICT experts but did not control strategy going forward. So SPSA had to try and influence some of the decisions that were made with no strategic control of saying, no, we're not doing that.
No doubt.
Now, when you had 8 different Chief Constables with 8 different strategic directions, I'm sure, and it was before my time, because fortunately after I turned up for reform was the focus and we worked quite collaboratively together, but I've got absolutely no doubt there were circumstances where ICT said, that's a bad idea, and they were told to do it anyway, because this is what we want to do. And that's very difficult in a command and control environment. I think IT and industry nurtures better when IT are left to be the IT guys and give the enabling technology to deliver the operational priorities of whatever business line they are in. You tell us what you want, we will tell you the best way to deliver it. And I think that's a good model. From that purpose, I don't think it makes a difference if me and my team report in to SPA or me and my team report into the Police Service of Scotland. It should make no difference whatsoever if we have the freedom to express ourselves.
Sure. Well, I've got to say from my own point of view, just to save any doubt, I have no view where it should lie. I think that that's what we'll discover in the years ahead. But it seemed to me that we'd now painted a picture that indicated that we're moving forward and everything is sorted out and we know where we are. I think there's been a great deal of movement over this last 6-8 weeks, as you would acknowledge yourself. I'd like to hope that this subcommittee has had some encouragement in concentrating minds in that regard. But I've no doubt that next month will be a very significant month. I know that Neil gave a view about how critical it is. Do you see it equally as critical next month to get a decision one way or the other?
I think the sooner the better. There are commercial reasons why a decision sooner rather than later is required. I also think some of the systems that I6 is scheduled to replace were out of date when the I6 process started, which means they're even more out of date at this time.
Very much so.
And the longer these systems remain without being replaced by either I6 or another system, the risk of failure within that system will increase.
Thanks, Convener.
Kevin.
Thank you, Convener. And obviously we have seen in the past a bit of a guddle in some regards, and I think that guddles always come to pass when the ICT experts are not listened to and the customer themselves say, we want this, this and this, no matter if they're told that it won't work or not. And I have to be honest, Convener, in past life, there are many ICT systems, particularly some HR systems which I was involved with, that I used to use an adjective in front of the name of that system, which Mr. Richardson would probably arrest me for if I used it in a public place today. Convener, but I think that one of the things which we haven't gone into today is some of the systems that are still in place, some of the legacy that are there. And my question, I think, is really for Mr. Leven here. In terms of some of the HR systems and other systems that are in place in the previous 8 force areas at this moment, are there any of those systems which would work across the country as a whole? Are there any way, if there were, to use procurement methods to export those across the country, or are we basically looking at systems which maybe are outdated anyway?
And HR is a very interesting one of the unlinked systems for you to choose, because the HR systems we use are in-house built HR systems that I believe were, and it was way before my time in policing, but I believe were originally designed by a policeman and put in place in Tayside, and
who knows?
And it pulled throughout. And our HR systems are on proprietary software, and we have the opportunity to nationalise that HR system. Are there better products in the marketplace? That's something I think we should investigate. And if we take a look at a licensing model for what we call an ERP solution, which is combined HR, combined finance, combined payroll, combined duty management, all one system, you're talking quite an expensive marketing plan for that. Would our resource be best put in getting better bang for buck to develop our current system and make it national? Possibly, and we've got a team looking at that, 100% looking at that to see what the best possible solution is. Again, not designed by the ICT guys, collaboratively working with the HR functions of Police Scotland, the HR function of the authority, on what do you want to go forward, how can we link it into finance, how can we link it into duty management, how can we link it into command and control, and how can we link it into the various different pension pots right throughout the country that we have to link into to make this a good national solution.
I know Mr. Finney wants to get in a very, very small question, and hopefully you can give me a brief answer. In terms of those combined systems, with finance and HR and everything else. These are often the systems that the customer wants all of the bells and whistles on as well. These are the ones which, from my experience, have often been doomed to failure right at the start. What do you, as an IT professional, think is the best way forward in these regards? Is it these joint systems, or is it keeping some of these functions separately and living with that?
I think we would need to ask our customer exactly what they're looking for as an IT professional. Of course, I want technology to do the job. Therefore, I would say a joint system would be great. It would be a good project to go forward. In the policing environment, is that the best use of resource and the best use of money? And I'm sure you all understand the size of a project to deliver that. Would we have the money available to do? We're not too sure. I think we should have one combined system, which in its own right would link into the I6 product set. So again, we start bringing the information far closer together than we possibly can. Is that achievable? That's what we're trying to find out at the moment.
And obviously, hopefully your customer would listen to your very good advice.
I'm sure they will.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
So I think if I'm understanding what you're saying is the SPA should make the decisions regarding the ICT and not, even if it's more costly and takes from other budgets.
No, certainly wasn't the impression I meant to come across. It should be a collaborative. One thing I've tried to work very closely with Neil and his team is that any ICT business case is a collaborative piece of work between Police Scotland and the ICT function.
Is that the case, Mr Richardson?
Well, I think there's no doubt what Martin's saying is he's trying very hard to work with the business. What I guess I have said is I think that is increasingly difficult, and it's always been difficult, and I'm not convinced that it's going to get easier moving forward under current arrangements. And what I described at the very outset in terms of the I6 piece is that I think that the sequencing of all activities moving forward should follow the business, first of all, absolutely nailing what we require, looking at the possibilities, taking off the luxury extras, the bells and whistles that we don't actually require, but make sure we've got an absolutely rock solid requirement. We then go not just to a particular supplier but extend it to the market, and competitive dialogue, I think, is a sensible option to move forward and engage the whole market. And for any significant financial investment, I think that is absolutely, it takes a bit longer and it does cost money to do, but it is absolutely worth doing. And through that you determine what the best technical solution is. And so moving forward into a brave new world, again, if we could re-script it, I would be moving away from a big in-house capability, dramatically away from that. I would be looking to fully exploit the market, and I would be looking for the in-house technical kind of experts, Martin and colleagues, to be very small, very lean and very specialised in almost providing a bridge between the service and that requirement into that technical world.
Right. John?
Well, everything did sound very straightforward early on, and I think tensions are good and competing demands are good, and I think the phrase "bring in line" maybe that Mr Richardson used highlighted some of these. I certainly my view, and the figure I think of 7 million used, I think it's nearer 14 million of public money wasted was simply because no one was prepared to say, Chief Constable, that's nonsense. Yeah. And we cannot have a situation like that again. The hierarchical nature of the police, the idea because someone was in charge they could waste public money and no one would challenge it, has to be done. So IT's decided the client-customer relationship is terribly important, I think, and we will be very keen to monitor that. Can I ask 3 very brief questions which might be able to just give one word answer? Do we have the time frame, please, for the fleet and estate strategies? And if not, could perhaps you get some information to the clerks? Because I think, particularly with regard to the estate strategy, there are a lot of people in a lot of areas who would be interested to know how that ties in with the ICT. Also, are you able to say whether the handheld devices that were trialled by operational officers form part of the ICT work that's been talked about, please?
I can't comment on the fleet or estates strategy.
No, what you were here to talk about. So
no, but it does link in because it's. Yes.
But we can be written to about that.
Sure.
You're prepared for it. Yes. As
far as mobile data goes, I received some questions from the researchers, and it was difficult to understand what the questions were. So I've brought a brief with me to go through mobile data, if you like, because we've got 2 different mobile data projects working at the present moment in time. One in Lothian and Borders, which is a product set that is an electronic notebook for lights, so officers can take things and
and
then they dock back at the station and that will electronically
right.
put things in. And then there's a pilot that has been taking place in G Division in Extrathclyde, and that pilot was funded by the National Police Improvement Agency with Home Office funding to provide devices that could give officers on the street access to some police databases and background databases going forward. That project was successfully deployed last year, and there is now moves to have a business case brought forward for 2014, I believe January 2014, to the next investment in terms of national mobile data if we decide it's something we want to do. But again, this is a police-led project with ICT resource involved in it, but it's a police-led project, and that would come more within Neil's remit in terms of the recommendations and what we want to do.
Okay, thanks. Just to confirm, we'll get the information back about the progress with the estate and...
Yes, no, we'll be written about
much,
that. Is there anything anybody else wishes to ask? Or
Can we just answer?
Every time I say this, I'm not rebuking you. You're going to get to ask it. Every time I say it, somebody puts their hand up. Well, we're not. We're finishing in 4 minutes.
It's,
yes.
it's not a contentious thing, I don't think, but has there been some thought from the ICT environment about linking with the fire service and identifying... I almost faint at the prospect, given the difficulties that you already face with police service, but the crossover savings that might be achieved from the mutual pipes that are necessary for shifting information around the country, and perhaps some of the softwares that will be available, which can maintain security separately within the systems, but might be able to piggyback on each other's resources. Has that been thought about? Is it just
absolutely.
too hard?
Absolutely. I gave a presentation at the Scottish Wide Area Network Conference in January, where I put a map of all the Scottish police stations up on the board, then put an overlay of the fire brigade stations up on the board, and said, why are we paying twice for pipes that go into buildings that are inevitably next door to each other?
So is there a future there?
In fairness, myself and Sandra, who's my equivalent in the Scottish Fire and Rescue, is we've both been kind of busy recently, and we've agreed to talk about it, but we haven't really pushed it forward to this stage, and that will be coming up soon. And it's not just collaboration there, we should be looking at collaboration with the ambulance service as well, and the entire blue light
industry. I feared to
industry.
mention that. Okay, thank you.
And Kevin,
mention of the fire service and the ambulance service. What about the local government, the councils right across the country? In some regards, I would hope that you'd be looking in terms of particularly hardware procurement to collaborate with them. Beyond that, as you know, in terms of server sources and all of the rest of it, I would hope that you would be looking at that too, and trying to save the public as many pounds as you possibly can that can be diverted into frontline policing. Absolutely, and I sit in a couple of Scottish Government programme boards in terms of industry relations and ICT strategy programme boards going forward. Police are involved in the design work for the Scottish Wide Area Network, and there's some excellent work coming out in terms of Scotland's digital future, which is all about collaboration and best value for money for the public in Scotland, and I can absolutely guarantee you we continue to look for every opportunity for savings between the entire public sector in Scotland. Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
I thank you both very much, and I thank you for your attendance and your evidence. And that ends the question session. I say the next meeting will be Thursday, 13th of June, when we'll continue to take evidence on ICT provision from the SPF and the Scottish Association of Police Superintendents and Unison, who no doubt will be paying attention to this evidence session. And I formally close the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you.